was talking about the shoreline zoning ordinance, but.
So did I. I did.
Because he had another comment that was
Yeah.
Right.
that's
about that.
Right, yeah. No, the discussion of footprint versus, square footage.
Yeah.
Right.
I grabbed my shoulder and something with this, and that's all right.
Well, let's see now. It is 7 o'clock, I think, according to that one. Should bring the meeting to order, 7:02. Welcome, everybody. Our goal tonight is to take comments on the commercial review development ordinance that we do have in front of you. Did you see the copy to your right? Each have a copy? Mac, you got a copy? And our goal is to provide as much clarity and as much improvement to what we've already done, I suppose, with this ordinance. You all may be aware that the overarching goal for this is to bring this in line with other priorities that the town has already established that would keep it in line with the comprehensive plan. And in order to do so, we can't do that with just one ordinance review, but this is one, and it does meet many of the things that have been outlined and identified by previous groups. So this is our attempt to do so. Okay? Let's see now. How does the board feel about, because we did have some written comments that came in from a person from the town. Should we do sort of consider those first, or how does the board feel at this time?
I would not consider them first. Maybe discuss them after everybody that's here today. To the extent they have questions or comments, I would
agree. If they're here, no use putting you waiting for us to get done other business.
Okay.
Of course, you're welcome to stay for the discussion of the other comments, but Bubba got to come first. Who came?
Yep.
Okay. And not trying to get out of order, since we do have public here for the hearing, would the board agree to consider the previous minutes after we do the other discussion? Okay, that's good. Great. So that's what we'll do, if time permitting. So I'd like to entertain comments that the audience might have about the commercial review development ordinance. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to review it. Yes, Mac.
Well, I have lots of comments, so I don't know how you want to go through it. I mean, like, lots of significant on almost every section. So do you want to go through it section by section, or I don't want to just hog everything either, but I want to make sure I get my comments in. So I don't know. When you see the comments, I'm happy to just go through it word for word, but I don't know if that's okay with
Probably,
everybody.
yeah, it may not be okay with everybody
Yeah, so
to do that. Any suggestions?
Can you summarize them for us and everybody else that's here, and then leave those comments with us to digest along with any others we receive?
I prefer to go through them in detail, to be honest. Like, if you go through each section, I could say why this or why not, but overall, I guess, if we just go to the purpose, Article 2, the purpose, if you look at the purpose of this ordinance, every single one of those, A through F, are protected. That is, the purpose of the commercial development review ordinance is to mitigate potential nuisances, address a wide range of environmental planning issues, reduce offsite impacts, protect water quality, So the general purpose is mitigating negative effects of commercial development. And so that's my approach to the whole thing. So I have lots of comments throughout that are basically, how can we mitigate the effects of commercial development? That's the overall purpose, not necessarily making it quicker to get a permit or making it easier to get a permit, but what's the purpose? The purpose is mitigating the impact, so let's do that.
Peter, if I may suggest, maybe we first see if, a couple options. One is to see if anybody else has any comments or questions of wanting clarification, I guess, on what a portion of the ordinance means. And then go section by section, and as this gentleman lays out his concerns, if somebody else has something, we hear that at the same time. That would be my...
Yeah, it sounds very reasonable to me to go ahead that way, so.
This gentleman's characterized the ordinance quite well in the sense that it doesn't regulate where activities can happen. It regulates how they can happen, and the goal is to mitigate the nuisance and potentially other undesirable impacts of industrial or commercial development. But it does not dictate where in town it can happen, unlike zoning. The history of this ordinance is it was originally adopted in 2001, and so this is the first major rewrite. There have been a few smaller, minor revisions done, one of which introduced an error into it, but so it's been a long time since it's been looked at comprehensively.
I was wondering, for our purposes, if you could identify yourself so we'll know who we're talking about.
Oh, sure, sorry. My name is Matt Greger-Stocco. I'm a resident here. I try to get involved as I can, and I used to be a land use planner. I worked at KV-COG when I first moved here 10 years ago. Then I worked for a state planning office. I no longer work as a land use planner, but I have a background in land use planning. So this is a very real concern.
I thought you were familiar, now I know why.
Sorry.
So, George, I think you recommended going through this section by section, or article by article?
And opening it up to everybody, but I would first see if there are questions, so we can clarify those first, because, people's understanding may depend on, and their comments may depend on the answers to those questions.
So that's a great idea. Yes, Mr. Pulsifer.
Bill Pulsifer. We have one question that has kind of bugged us over the past 20 years. If a person opens up a business on the main street in Belgrade Lakes, what is the situation for parking? Are they required to provide parking? For instance, Fred Saxon's house has just been sold, which is next to the Sunset Grill, and I understand it's going to be antique. Is there any requirement for parking?
Great.
Yeah.
I can
There
start,
is.
and others can jump
Sure,
in if they wish.
sure.
I mean,
Go-
this ordinance, of course, would only apply if what is proposed, triggers the ordinance in the first place, and one of the criteria is for a residential structure to be converted to a commercial structure, which sounds like what you're describing. In which case, there's a whole section on the parking requirements that would go with that. Given the nature of the severe parking shortage in the village, they would have to comply with that, in all likelihood, it would require providing off-street parking. And there's a formula for calculating how much.
Well,
And-
you know, there are 4 businesses in town right now that were residential. And, these people that live in this house or business, don't have parking for their own vehicle and they park in the road. So how can they get a permit for that business? I don't understand it.
Well, I don't know what businesses you're talking about, but at least in the time I've been on the board, there hasn't been even an application from any business in the village
Well,
in the last two and a half
Across the
years.
street from our house,
and the pizza place, and Tim Yotides, that was residential, and now he has a business in front there, and he doesn't have any parking.
Well, that goes to my point earlier, the ordinance has to be first triggered, and this ordinance isn't intended to regulate all commercial enterprises in the town, all new or, and particularly existing. It's only the larger ones. That's the way it was designed in 2001, and it continues to be today. So, for example, if somebody would have to construct a structure of 1,200 square feet or larger, they would have to do other kinds of development that would trigger the ordinance. It's questionable, I don't know, what happened before I was on the board with regard to the examples you gave, which are sort of street vendor kind of things.
So
There's been so much fuss about the Dollar General business that, and they have to have 36 parking spaces, and they only have 30, from what I understand from reading in the paper. And there's such a big fuss over that, yet all those businesses in the village don't even have one parking place. So I can't understand, I just can't understand this.
Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of jump on board with what George was saying. So with that Yotides one, I know the board heard a previous application from them that
Was denied.
was denied, right? And so they did not pursue anything that would have triggered the commercial review ordinance. So is that, Gary, maybe you could help me,
That's correct.
is that called the,
She wanted to convert that garage to a restaurant.
Yes, I know.
The planning board denied it because she did not have parking.
So what's the difference in what they have now when they don't have parking?
Because I've been told that people don't feel that a mobile lunch cart has to go to the planning board for commercial development review.
What people?
People at the town office, I think I've discussed it with the planning board a couple times. Just ask the question, do you feel that this is something that requires planning board review? And the answer was no for the majority.
But does that make sense to you? It's still a business that's going to require vehicles,
They felt
parking.
it because it was temporary. I talked to the former town manager about it. The feeling was because it was temporary, that nobody saw it as a big issue.
I think if you ask people today, you get different response.
I mean, I did ask the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did ask the question.
Yeah.
And as far as the lady you're talking about that just purchased the home by Sunset Grill,
Yeah.
I met with the realtor tonight, and I informed the realtor that if she's converting that from a residence to an antique shop, she does have to go to the planning board, and she does have to provide parking. So they do know that. I talked to her just this evening.
Right.
So-
Bill told me that they were refused, a request for, additional parking on the other, driveway, on the other side of the house, and they were denied that.
They may have been, I don't know.
State,
state DOT
Yeah.
or something?
Entrance permit?
Well,
Oh.
it's right on that busy,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Be-
intersection.
Yeah. So in that case, I mean, I don't know how this is going to play out, but it sounds like if they can't provide additional parking, right? by this entrance permit, it sounds like what you're talking about on that side of that property, they would still have to provide parking if they're gonna come to the planning board for approval on their permit. If they can't do that, then I don't know how we could approve it.
Is that the same person that has the shop, at
Mhm.
the Catholic Church, in their
Yes.
parking area?
So I just wanna make sure, we're answering your questions to the best of our ability relative to the ordinance that's currently in place. In going forward with the revisions to what we want to present to the voters in the future, it would still have the same requirements that sufficient parking be provided. That's still going forward, so it's in and it's still going forward. I don't know if that answers your
Very important
question.
that pursue it.
Absolutely. Yes, I personally agree that there is limited space in the village. Understatement of the
It'll be
night.
less
Yeah.
after they do the big dig.
Right.
I hope I live long enough to see the chaos.
You have a perverse sense of humor, you know that?
You may also know that your tidies at one point came to us, you wanted to buy the antique, the place that's going out of business, or at least it says it's going out of business now, put the restaurant in.
Pretty
We
empty.
discussed parking for that application as well, but I don't know whatever happened, but that project never went through, I guess.
Right.
Never bought the building.
It's recently been sold, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Say, Gary?
It has recently been sold.
The antique place,
so it is, and as to your original question, does the ordinance have something in it about parking? Yes, it does.
And we've denied uses down there for that reason.
We have, yep.
Because, John Dyer's house is for sale, is on the market. And, I'm just kind of wondering if another person's gonna buy that for a business, and again, there would be no parking.
They'll have to come to
So-
the planning board if they convert it.
Right. So they may think twice about converting it to a business if it doesn't have parking. Just saying.
So I guess the rumor we heard about somebody buying that house and converting it to parking was only a rumor.
Apparently,
We had heard at one
John
point that
Dyer's
the
house?
Saxton house was gonna
Oh,
be
the
purchased
Saxon
and converted to parking.
parking.
Yeah, by a coalition of the businesses down there.
I also heard that one of the reasons they decided not to do that was because that the people would, at the village, at the Sunset Grill would use it. So they decided they didn't want that, the business group.
Okay.
It was actually the Friends of the Village was the business group.
Oh, is that right?
Right, but it was a group, and they had talked about,
Hmm.
we talked about several places.
Well, some of the friends of the village don't use their own parking lot, so I won't go into any detail.
Peter, this gentleman had.
Yes, Mac. Yep. Anything? No. Are there any other questions about the yeah, any other questions? Yeah. No? Okay. In that case, let's go back to the schedule of looking at this article by article.
Well, I guess, just to start at the title, it's a commercial development review ordinance, but I'm just wondering if you would consider calling it a non-residential development review ordinance.
Were you on the planning board before? Because
No.
I'm just teasing because we are changing it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have the latest and greatest that's up there?
I have this.
See, that's old.
Oh,
I think you probably want that one.
Is that the one you got from me?
Yeah,
It's the same one, it's just not the color.
It is?
Yeah, should be.
It don't even look the same.
well, it's not in color.
It don't even look the same.
I thought so.
I think it's double sided.
All right,
Yeah,
that's fine. I just wanted to make
so-
sure we're reading the same book.
Yep.
Peter, if I understood your question, why is the title of the ordinance commercial development review rather than non-residential?
Correct.
Oh,
That's,
ahead.
I think you answered a different question.
I think I did too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
We actually consciously left it the way it was, just to avoid confusion, frankly, even though the ordinance from its inception has been broader than just commercial. And
Right.
it covers, non-residential
Yeah.
development.
And-
throughout the ordinance, it's non-residential is
Correct.
used,
Yeah.
not
Right.
commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the problems we had was the way it was written, it was a mixed bag of commercial and non-residential throughout the ordinance, so
We just
Yeah,
wanted to
try
be
to standardize it.
consistent. Right.
And before I go any further, I just wanna say thank you to everybody. I know it's a significant commitment to be on the planning board, significant commitment to do an ordinance like this. Gary, I know you put in incredible amount of time.
Well, they do more of this stuff than I do.
So I do, before I start critiquing, I want you to know that I do honestly appreciate everything that's well done. I really do. So on page 3 then, Article 3, applicability.
Mhm.
Section F. So it talks about applicability is, does this applies to what? And section F says paved areas or impervious surfaces. But then there's an exception for repavement of existing paved or impervious surfaces. And I just disagree with that. I don't think you should exempt repaving because we know a lot more now about erosion and runoff and mitigating those things than we did when these roads were originally built and paved. And so if there is an opportunity to capture mitigation for that road, I think we should, basically. So you used to have a square foot limit, or maybe you could put in a mileage limit or something like that, or both, and that kind of makes sense. You don't wanna, some guy's long driveway, you don't wanna force him to do something, but, if there's a long road that's been there for 100 years, and it was repaved 30 years ago, now we know a lot more about how we can mitigate that road. So I don't think it should be permanently exempt.
Does this pertain to all roads or private roads?
Here,
Yeah.
or it'd be commercial, it'd have to
Right.
relate to a commercial development, a
Yeah.
non-residential
Yeah.
development.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and more likely, it's the combination of a driveway and a parking lot,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
would think.
Yep.
Would the current repaving of the Point Road be subject?
That's why I was
On the
asking.
Point Road?
Yeah,
No,
doesn't trigger the ordinance at all.
would not.
And that would just be just for commercial entities, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
And-
exactly.
And those developed after 2001, because that's when the ordinance went into effect. But this gentleman's point is that if a retail store with a parking lot and a driveway reconstructs it, repaves it, it may be considered to, he would suggest that it trigger the ordinance so that you can deal with upgrading the means of soil erosion control. I assume you probably also mean stormwater and phosphorus.
A lot of this ordinance, you say, is bringing it up to DEP standards, especially the stormwater, which makes sense,
Mhm.
right? In which case, we would wanna bring existing
Yeah,
development up to
I
those
just-
standards.
My thought here is that even a DEP repaving existing paved area probably doesn't require anything. It's probably an exempt activity as far as any permitting there. My concern is that you try to grab on to just repavings or whatever, that the public would not support it as a general overall thing. You mean I need to get a permit and redo my erosion control or drainage or whatever simply because I'm repaving over existing pavement? That's my concern there, is that we need to put something that people will accept. But that's only my thought.
Well, I mean, it was in there before, and you took it out. And I just think it's, well, lake water quality is degrading in the Belgrade Lakes region, that's just a fact. And so I think we need to take every opportunity we can to try to mitigate that, and especially when there's paved parking areas right next to the lakes, if we can figure out a way to mitigate that better, we should do so.
It would have to be existing to be exempt
Right.
in this case.
Yeah. It says accepted repavement of existing paved and impervious surfaces shall be exempt from review. So think of all the paved surfaces you have in the village that can just repave all over again, without doing anything to mitigate the stormwater runoff that goes straight into the lake.
Are there that many, that would be subject to the ordinance?
Well, Lake Point Real Estate, right there in the corner, is one that I can think of. There's a marina right next to, Center for All Seasons, the Center for All Seasons.
Several seasons paved, but the marina is not paved.
Well, I mean, I think if there's one, you should take it, meaning you could do more. I think, what they did at Day's store with the pervious pavers and, all that's great. I would love to see every place in the village like that. So, I think obviously it's awesome that somebody did it, so.
But your suggestion to us is that we reconsider that language, and in particular, consider reinstating language that, as in the original, where there's some kind of de minimis that would be exempt, but based on square footage.
Yeah, I mean, I would like you to reconsider, however you wanna reconsider. I'd appreciate that. I totally understand, Rich, your comment, has to be passed by the town, I totally get that, so that's part of the argument too.
Well, before we go, so how do we want to handle this? I mean, if we want to consider this one, or any of the items that are brought up tonight, how can we note that and then consider some things?
My thinking is we can't address all the comments tonight. We can listen to them and discuss them as such, but if he's got a lot of comments, we could be here till midnight if we try to resolve what we're gonna do with all those comments at this point.
Right.
With your thinking is-
Yeah, no, that would be my thought as well, because, and then we have the written comments that we may or may not get to tonight.
Yep.
So I would use tonight as an opportunity, since this is a public informational meeting, to receive comments and suggestions for changes, and then, you know, analyze them in more detail and then have our votes about what we're gonna change and what we're not gonna change.
Right.
Some of it might mean we have to go back to the select board, depending on how significant it is.
Right,
I don't know, but, and maybe invite this gentleman back, at that time.
Yep.
Or anybody else, Dick Bourne, for example, who submitted the written comments.
agreed. But my question is what mechanism do we wanna use to say, hey, this one we wanna consider, the comments about, and then go forward? I mean, just minutes, are minutes good enough? And then
Oh.
if so, just say, make sure Article 3F, consider comments from Mac. I mean, is that sufficient for our?
I would think so. I mean,
So are you okay with
obviously,
that?
Most of us, or at least myself, I'm making myself a few notes,
I'm
but,
making notes too, but Nick should also try to.
Okay.
yeah, no, absolutely.
So I will try to, as we go through this, make sure we hit the article and section so that it's clear in our minutes. So, okay, all right?
I'm also happy to give you my paper when I'm, after
Okay.
tonight.
Thank you, that'd be
If
great,
you don't want it, I won't be offended.
yeah. What's the next one that you have?
Page 5, Article 4, administration and enforcement.
Keep in mind, we have different page numbers.
Your pages are different than ours, that's.
We're single page, you're double, so our article's on page 9.
Mine's on 5.
Should be the same.
So-
Administration?
Article 4 is on 9 on ours.
That's all.
Really, mine's on 5.
Mine's on 5.
Mine's double
Mine's
sided.
on 8.
Okay, so,
Okay.
Article and section, and you're all right?
Yeah, Article 4,
okay,
Section 2, role of the code enforcement officer.
Yeah,
You say the CEO shall have the following powers and duties. E, to issue permits. And I just don't think the CEO should be allowed to issue permits. I've argued for a long time that Belgrade needs more code enforcement hours. There's tremendous shoreline in Belgrade.
mhm,
There's a large population, a lot of big roads. There just needs, and please do not take this as a critique of anybody. Gary, you are a great CEO, I'm not criticizing you. You do stuff any time of the day, I get that. But 18 hours is just not sufficient to do everything that needs to happen in this town, because there's too much going on in this town.
That's fine, but
So,
what does that have to do with the issuance of permits? Who's supposed to issue permits?
the planning board,
Building permits?
non-residential development review permits, code of, yeah. Okay,
The intent of that is, after they review a project, I issue the permit.
okay, so maybe I'm misinterpreting here. Right now, what this ordinance does is it adds the ability for a CEO to issue permits for small projects.
Yeah, there's two things at play here. The basic process, not only in this our ordinance as it's written now, but other towns that use a similar kind of model ordinance, is that the planning board reviews the attributes of an application but the building permit that after the planning board is issued by Gary.
Sorry for that.
The other aspect of it is what is in the next section 3, that I think you're alluding to, where we're proposing to carve out the very small permit, small applications, and those would be, in essence, a permit by rule that Gary would issue without planning board involvement. The basis of that was during the course of the comprehensive plan, development of the comprehensive plan. I served on the economic development subcommittee. We heard from a lot of businesses saying that, geez, why do I'm setting up Rock and Roll, for example, when they were still in business. You know, I got a gravel parking lot and a portable a hot dog stand that I take out on the ice in the wintertime to sell to ice fishermen. You know, why do I need to get the full-fledged permit? Isn't there a way to modify this more to the scope of what I'm proposing? And this is our attempt to do that.
Which I totally respect, and there's lots of, I've seen lots of ordinances that have a minor development permit and a major development permit. So, you know, the requirements for the applicant, there's less cost, less paperwork, less time, but it still goes to the planning board and not the CEO. I would not be against a minor and a major, but still going to the planning board. Until such time that the code enforcement officer works more hours in Belgrade, honestly. They're just,
You know, we probably have 3 or 4 commercial development permits per year in this town.
yeah.
But it's not overwhelming.
No.
Although, we've probably done more than that this year, though.
We probably did 6 or 7, but
Yeah.
I don't believe it's been 10.
Right.
Yeah, I totally get that Belgrade is a small town, it doesn't have a ton of stuff going on. Nonetheless, there's a lot of stuff that the applicant does have to submit, which requires a lot of time on behalf of the CEO to review that. And I do think even coming before the planning board still gives some opportunity for comment from other people than just going to the CEO. No.
Yes, Michael.
Today, we don't have a lot going on perhaps, but one of the things we're concerned about, as you can see, businesses marching up from Augusta right up 27. And I don't think that's gonna be the case forever. I think you got six permits, or 6 applications this year. Previously, it might have been 3. I think that's indicative of what's coming down the road, literally coming down the road. So, I think some of what Mac is saying should be looked at a little closer.
Okay.
That, by the
So-
way, these are my comments, I'm not speaking for the select board.
Understood. Thank you.
I don't give us enough trouble.
Yeah. So let's take that into consideration. So that's Article 4, Section 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I totally agree with your comment, you know, it's.
Yep.
We had a great recession, so obviously that didn't happen, but, even the comments here about places being purchased in the village, you know, that's starting to happen. Things are happening, and it's only gonna get
Yep.
worse, and 18 hours a week isn't enough to do that, and everything else, shoreline zoning, you know, all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Section 4, permit administration. Uh, 4.1, expiration.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowing 2 12-month. Why so long? That's a long time. 2 12-month extensions from original permit.
We have a comment here. Allows extension of the time that a permit would expire.
So you issue a permit and now this person has 3 years to do something.
And that's upon request from the permittee. It may be extended. Doesn't mean it will be.
I guess my thought is that'd be a good reason for extending it. It's not we have to extend it.
Right.
There'd have to be good reason for that.
Right.
I totally agree, but that language never gets, you know, once the language is in there, the language is there, and the planning interpret it strictly. A year later, you get somebody else on the board that interprets it loosely, and that's my fear. You know, if the opportunity is there, I've seen multiple towns where planning boards just interpret it as, oh, well,
Hmm.
you know, you need an extension, great, okay, no problem. So I'm wary of allowing that to be put in. You know, if you get a permit, you need an extension, 6 months, another building season, okay, but if you really can't do something, then go back, put your ducks in a row, come back to us, and we'll see how the town has changed in the last 2 years, and see if this development still makes sense in the same way.
I don't really recall, frankly, what the justification was that KV Cog gave us, but one of my thoughts about this was, and this is sort of post-recession lessons learned kind of thing, is it took a lot of time to sell businesses in the process of being developed during the recession. At the time I worked at DEP, and I knew that they, in many cases, had to extend the time. For example, the amount of time a gas station could remain out of service because it took longer than 12 months to sell it. It took between 2 and 3 years. So this is sort of in line with that, where if you have a development that's in progress and gets sold, and, you know, developer A is not making it and selling it, wants to sell it to developer B, that would be one reason. I understand your point. Your point's well taken about minimums become maximums with the passage of time and changing of personnel on volunteer boards like this. Do you have any sense of, you know, I mean, it's hard to know what kind of development may be coming down Route 27 to Belgrade. You know, will it be a Home Depot? Probably not. More, you know, stores like a dollar store or something similar, maybe a small Hannaford, that kind of thing. And then we have, you know, larger proposals potentially coming from, say, Hammond Lumber or somebody like that that's already here. I don't know what a reasonable time frame is to expect somebody to start and complete construction, given that variability. And it seems like some kind of flexibility is in order, but.
Mhm.
This is really just an extension for a substantial start. It doesn't talk about completion.
Oh, right, yeah.
I guess, I may have misunderstood what we even have here. I was thinking we had a provision that'll extend it for a 12-month period, but this allows it for 2 12-month periods, I guess, so
Right.
Right.
really
Right.
3 years.
But each time having to come back to the planning board to get approval.
Yeah, I think, if I may not be remembering this correctly, but it seemed like we talked about this with Chris Huck. And there was consideration that a project may be in the works for a while, and then may not be able to start for whatever reason. Maybe weather puts them off for a few months or something, and then money. And then before you know it, it's 13 months, right, into it, or it's approaching 12 months. So they're trying to get into the next thing. So I guess my example isn't a good one, but there was consideration of events that could happen that could put something on beyond the first 12 months thing. So then they thought, well, if it's more than 12 months, why not a second 12-month window? So you'd have that amount of time, because of the commercial activity that was being proposed, may have obstacles for that applicant to overcome.
There are 2 instances going on right now, one in Waterville, one in Winslow. Taco Bell in Waterville, they can't get enough power going into the building, and in Winslow, they can't get enough materials, or the supplier can't supply it for the Dunkin' Donuts. So both of them are on hold. And it's been like that for 6 months. So there are chances that it could take better than 12 months to get it completed.
All this is to start, it has
Right.
nothing to do with
Yeah.
completion.
Right.
It could take
Right.
5 years to complete a project.
Right, right.
If Hammond Lumber was doing a major project, they may be on it for 5 years. All this is to start.
Yeah, so I'd say if you can't start within a year of, you can't even apply to the planning board until you have this, all these, that we haven't even gotten into. You know, the application's pretty extensive. So you've obviously put a lot of thought and time and money into preparing your ability to put this in place. So
Mhm.
then, if you can't even substantially start within a year, then arguably, how did you get everything all together in the first place? You know, okay, so you wanna get another extension, 1 year maybe. Circumstances happen, I get that, but
Mhm.
just that second year extension really bothers me.
Okay, duly noted. So Article 4, Section 4, 4.1. Yes, Michael?
Ready to move to the next section?
Yes.
4.2, you read what that says? Says a permit, singular, is transferable to subsequent owners, plural, of the property, provided they have not expired. That means that as long as you're not dead, you can transfer the permit. I don't think that's what you meant. You see what I'm saying?
Provided the permit has not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right, permit.
Thank
Good
you.
point. Provided,
If we make that change, we don't have to go back to the selectmen, do we?
No, I think you should, we need to laugh.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Thank you. Yes, Mac? Mac?
Oh, sorry. Section 5, application procedure. So. D just talks about a CEO permit again, so. And then 5.2, code enforcement officer review. So that's getting back to the whole, I don't think there should be code enforcement. There should be a non-planning board option.
What this is intended for on D is that I meet with the applicant to make sure that they've got all the information before scheduling the planning board meeting.
Right, right.
Therefore, they don't come into a meeting and have all kinds of items missing
Yeah.
that they're supposed to have.
Which I think is great, a pre-application meeting, I think is great. I just saw that, as to whether the application, the CEO would make a determination at that pre-app meeting as to whether the application is a CEO permit or a planning board permit. So that, I just caught it there as, I don't think there should be a CEO permit option. So the CEO is making a determination whether it's a CEO.
Okay.
So then, the next page. 5.3, application submission for planning board review.
Mm-hmm.
B. It says within 10 days of receipt of the application, the code enforcement officer determines whether the application is complete. Used to be 35 days. Maybe there's an argument 35 is too long, but 10 days, I think that's crazy. Especially for a CEO, again, who doesn't even work half-time.
Usually we have a meeting in my office on a given evening, and I can tell you, I go down through the checklist with them, and usually it's done that night. I can say, yeah, you've got what you need. I think 10 days is way too long, personally.
Well, but see, here's the thing, if you, this is kind of getting back to my comment to Rich about planning, once it's on paper, it's on paper. The composition of the planning board changes. You're not always gonna be the code enforcement officer in Belgrade. But if it on paper says 10 days, doesn't matter who the CEO is, 10 days is the maximum. So it doesn't matter what kind of workload the CEO has at that time, the maximum is 10 days once this ordinance is in effect. It doesn't say you have to take 10 days. If you, Gary, don't have a lot on your plate, and you have lots of experience, and you can go through it in one night, great. Nothing says you have to take 10 days. Nothing says you have to take 35 days. You can do it in one day, great. But if you put 10 days, then somebody coming later without your experience, not as knowledgeable about Belgrade, a lot more issues on his or her plate, that 10 days might be difficult, but you forced it on her. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yep.
So I don't know the reasoning. Chris from KV Cog had a comment in here, just said shortens waiting time for a complete application from 35 to 10 days. I'm not sure. What
I
else
think he was making it consistent with other towns.
Yeah, that's probably the case. But
I mean, one possibility, and this may be a lack of precision, but, is, you know, maybe we should consider 10 business days. I mean, that's 10 calendar days is, could be problematic.
yes, that's a good possibility too. But we have that duly noted.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a good point. Something else I did notice around here, that if you make a distinction to 10 business days, and I think you do once or twice, but if you do it on everywhere, that does make a huge difference.
Yep.
10 business days. That'd be 2 business days. That's
good point. Okay. Is that Mr. Pulsifer?
I just happened to notice on B in 5.2, it says 5 working days. Depending on something.
So 5.2B? 5.2B.
Right.
I guess it always
Thank
says
you.
holidays, doesn't it?
Right. So I wonder if maybe, you know, working, I think working is like business, and perhaps we could be consistent and say business in all cases, or working in all cases, or something to be consistent anyway.
Business sounds more professional.
Working, subject to interpretation.
What are you saying, Michael?
No comment, other than my comments made.
Okay, good point.
Um,
Moving on.
Well, just for that, the code enforcement, that for 5, Mr. Pulsifer's comment was for a code enforcement officer review, which presumably is a less intense application versus planning board review, which application requirements would be more, so it would take longer to review. I think that's why the discrepancy was there. That's all I'm saying.
Could be.
Okay, so then we go all the way to 5.5, additional information and studies. So we're into the submission requirements. Additional information and studies. Be page 12. And, section B says the planning board may, at its discretion, retain independent assistance to review or supplement the evidence presented by the applicant and received during the public hearing. Right? Everybody following me?
Yep.
No.
What
Okay.
section are you in?
Oh, sorry, it's 5.5 B,
Okay.
Page 11.
page 12.
12.
Okay.
5.5.
Mine's 11.
Forget
Mine's
the page.
15. I'm on
Yeah.
16.
5.5.
Yep.
Additional information and studies. B.
Yep.
So the planning board may retain independent technical expertise. Right?
Yep.
Presented by the applicant received during the public hearing. But if you go to section 6, planning board review procedure, 6.2, notice and meeting requirements. Used to say notice and hearing requirements, now it says notice and meeting requirements. A1 removes the requirement for a public hearing, which I'm totally against.
Wait, A1. Wait, what are we saying here?
You're saying that it's no longer, that when you apply for a permit, the planning board is no longer required to have a public hearing.
Peter, you may recall that
Yep.
this was Chris's recommendation that there really is no difference between a public, for us to invite the public to one of our regularly scheduled meetings versus holding a public hearing.
Right.
Both have a record of the discussion and comments, et cetera, and that in his experience, it was more efficient for towns to handle it in the course of their normal routine planning board meetings than to hold a special public hearing and with, further delay, of course, to the applicant and further delay to the planning board.
It's good memory because I have the
That was the rationale that,
yeah. Yeah, yep, I agree. That was the rationale at the time.
Which I totally disagree with. A public meeting of the planning board is not the same thing as a public hearing. The notice requirements are different. And so, nothing against you, but I don't scour the paper to see what the agenda is for the planning board every month. So I have no idea what you're gonna do month to month. A public hearing, the notice is different. And the whole, if we go back to, the purpose, section 1, article 2, section 1 purpose, it says to mitigate potential nuisances associated with development from having a negative impact upon the community. So it says the purpose is having an impact on the community. It doesn't say having an impact on abutters. It says the community. So the community should have an opportunity to comment. Because the development doesn't just affect abutters, the development does affect the community. And the whole purpose of this ordinance is to mitigate that. And so the public, the community-wide, should have an opportunity to come and comment on that. And in addition, not only does it remove the requirement for public hearing, but if you look at it, it actually says the notice, so it says all abutters and landowners within 500 feet shall be notified by first-class mail, right? Of this planning board meeting. The notice shall contain a brief description of the project being proposed. The notice shall be mailed a minimum of 7 days prior to the planning board meeting. So you can mail it, and the neighbor can receive notice of the meeting less than 1 week before the actual meeting. And the neighbor is then expected to drop everything, whatever the neighbor has planned, and attend the meeting. That's the only opportunity, right? Then, in addition, it says, failure of a party to be notified to receive a notice shall not invalidate the public meeting, nor shall it require the planning board to schedule another meeting. So I'm giving you less than a week notice that somebody right next to you wants to develop their property. But if you don't happen to get it, oh well.
I would point out that this, what we're requiring, even though we're calling this a meeting instead of a hearing, which I kind of see as semantics, we actually have more notification requirements in here now than we had before. Before, it was simply,
We didn't
well,
notify
first, it
abutters.
wasn't even a requirement to hold a public hearing.
And we
Right.
didn't notify butters.
Right.
Yeah, it was put in the newspaper. So there's a heck of a lot more meat to it now than there was
Yeah.
before.
Peter, this is something we've discussed before, and that was the issue of how does the public know what's on our agenda?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can answer this, Nick. When Mary was our secretary, I believe she took care of that, because it wasn't that long ago that the public had absolutely no idea in the world what was on our agenda, because our agenda wasn't posted even on the town website. Is that been corrected?
The only way they can get the agenda right now for a basic meeting is the website and through email. That's the only way I've been told to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it
But it
sounds
is on
sounds
the
like it's a
website.
process that you follow now
Yes.
that at least gives two methods of notification
Yes.
of a basic, a regular
And that's
meeting.
comparable to what the select board does.
It is.
This was something we wrestled with, in part because in response to comments from the select board when we took the draft ordinance to them, and for Michael in particular, on how to get the word out beyond just, because it was originally drafted, this draft was originally drafted with just notice to abutters, which is, you know, kind of SOP with a lot of local ordinances, as you probably know better than I. And so we decided we wanted to expand it. We were trying to come up with something. This is something the applicant's not gonna do, but the town will be doing. And because we've had problems with the subdivision ordinance where applicants don't do it. So we thought that this was a more reliable system, but we also needed to try to make it doable. And I mean, I'm of the opinion that newspaper ads are useless. Nobody reads them. But what, you know, the notice in the mail was the next, is probably the most effective way to do it. My understanding, because I asked the same question you're asking about that language at the end there about, again, it's sort of standard ordinance language, and it's to allow the planning board to proceed if, for example, the homeowners in the area, some of them are on vacation. Well, the planning board, you know, has no control over that. I mean, we still have to conduct our business. You know, if they had their mail held for a week or two or whatever, you know, I understand your concern with that language, because it's a little, kind of put you off, but, I don't know, maybe the 7 days needs to be tweaked or something like that, because it sounds like you're suggesting that that's too short of notice, but.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems like you're really, you can avoid all of this if you just say you're gonna have a public hearing. The state mandates notice for public hearings, so you just follow the public hearing rules. Public hearing gives notice to everybody in town, and there, everything's covered. You don't have to worry about these details and.
Well, except that effectively, the notice isn't any better. In fact, it's worse.
Right.
Because you end up just advertising it in the
In the
newspaper,
newspaper.
you've met the legal requirements of the state. And nobody knows. You know, this is more effective in terms of getting the word out to the public.
I would want to go on record by saying that we did struggle with this, Mac. This was something that we really tried to nail down. And before going any further, I want to also make sure that you're aware of the last sentence in that paragraph also talks about the fact that at the discretion of the planning board, they can hold another, we call it, meeting. When such circumstances arise that we find out that someone was not notified, we may hold one. So based on that, that was our mindset, right? That, oh gosh, there could be these times when someone was out of town on vacation, didn't have enough time, to receive it in mail, and get to the town office on time. So we definitely did try to think about ways to accomplish that. But I agree that, that perhaps adjusting the days, that might be an
The other
approach.
thing we looked at was a larger area, so you have a larger part of the neighborhood where most of the impact would be in fact felt. I understand your point about this is about the entire community and the impact on the entire community as well as the neighborhood, but and had talked about, we had looked at what other towns were doing, and most are 500 feet or less. Most of them are considerably less than 500 feet. One town is the exception at 1,000 feet out from the development. I think if there were other suggestions, we're all ears on how to get the word out. I just don't think newspapers are the way to go because nobody reads them.
Well, but.
The legal ads, I mean.
Right, but see, here's the thing. I don't know how many people pay attention to notices, but I do, right? So if I go to a bulletin board in town, either outside the post office or outside the old town hall, and there's a notice for public hearing, or at the community center, there's a notice, public hearing, such and such is happening at the meeting. I see the word public hearing, and I say, hey, that's something big. I should notice. I should pay attention. If I see a notice that says, planning board is meeting on such and such date, and they're gonna deal with X and Y, well, it's just another planning board meeting. I know you say it sounds like semantics, but I disagree, because the word meeting has a completely different meaning from the word hearing. And when you see that on a notice, public hearing means this is a big deal that the community should take an interest in. When I see the word meeting, it's just a monthly meeting of the planning board, which maybe the details underneath will identify, well, this is a big deal. But I'm not even gonna read the details because it just says it's a public meeting. And so, no, I wouldn't read the newspaper, but I would read the notice posted around town. And that's how I would be alerted to the fact that a community-wide development is about to be heard.
Okay. I hear you. We should move along to the next item. No, it's good, it's good. We won't always agree, Mac, on everything, and
I hear you.
we get it.
By the way, thank you for putting this section in.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Vast improvement over nothing.
Right. From nothing to something. Good.
I mean, you could have a public hearing and notice of butters, and there's nothing wrong with
Right.
it, right?
Yes.
The other thing I would ask is, are not the rules of conduct
That's a good point, and I don't know all the details of them, but
They're spelled out in the planning board's charter.
yes, and I think it includes a recording, an audio recording maybe, or
Well,
something.
we do that anyway, you know, it's Robert's rules and that sort of thing. There's not a lot there, I have to say. You know, a lot of it's common sense, you know, having, you know, the applicant go first, having, you know, people opposed, people that are neither opposed or in favor, you know, making sure everybody gets an opportunity and regulating the time.
Well, you see, that's common sense. The whole point of having, you know, laws that spell out how it should be conducted is because common sense doesn't fit. Again, maybe you guys are great and you would have a second public meeting because you've decided that people weren't noticed, right? But you don't have to, and you're not gonna be here forever. And there will be people coming later that don't care that those people didn't notice. And if they don't have to, they won't. And not everybody's gonna follow Robert's rules because it's common sense. If they don't like what's going on, they're not gonna follow it unless they have to. I will take kind of a step back to 6.1, the timing of review. Again, you decreased it from 90 days to 60 days. And I know with the recession and everything, a lot of big things haven't happened, and so it's not a big deal in the recent history, but moving forward, 60 days, there's only 2 planning board meetings, and if you've got a complex project that needs to be discussed, you know.
60 days is 4 planning board meetings.
Oh, right, because you need twice not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Still, I don't know, again, I go back to, you know, CEO that's not even half-time, what if a lot of labor needs to be done? What if the planning board really wants more information? What if somebody comes at the 3rd or 4th meeting and introduces new information, you know, a
Mhm.
neighbor? I'm wary of limiting ourselves based on recent events.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, when you have 90 days, nothing says you can't turn it around in 20 days.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing says that. But if you say 20 days or 60 days, it does say that if you want 90 days, you can't have it.
The last sentence does say we can extend it.
With consent of the
Mutual consent.
Mm-hmm.
Mutual.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so if the applicant doesn't want you to take 90 days, then you won't be able to do it.
I understand your point. I actually had the same reservation about this initially until Chris explained it a little bit and kind of sold me on it. But I mean, there's no ordinance that we can write that will guarantee there'll be good people on this board in the future.
Correct.
Okay?
No matter what.
And that they'll interpret and implement the ordinance the way it's written. But having said that, because we've been in this situation already, and the reality of it is if you have an uncooperative applicant that's unwilling to give the planning board more time, more than likely, and what's gonna happen is the planning board's gonna deny that permit. Because the reason we're running out of time is because they haven't satisfied the findings of fact that we have to make under the law. And now, if that's really what it comes down to. And that sort of started playing itself out with next door, with the Dollar General. Not that the clock was running because they withdrew their application, but I was concerned about the clock running out, the way that was heading. And, you know, if an applicant hasn't satisfied the findings we have to make under the review criteria in this ordinance, then we have no option other than to deny the permit. The entire, burden of proof lies with them, not on us.
Which I totally agree with. But you would be amazed at how many times I've been to planning boards and seen examples where they don't follow it, they just don't. When I used to work at KV-COG, I used to go around all the towns in Somerset and Kennebec County, and honestly, what I did was try to instill confidence into planning boards. Because the vast majority had this, but they didn't have the confidence to stand up to the developers. And so you say that, and I totally agree with you. But again, you're not always gonna be on the board. And I'm wary of when that board changes to any number of boards that I've seen here in central Maine, where they don't have that same confidence in their ability to deny a permit. And so, has there been, how many examples have there been where the 90 days was a problem? Like, if you could do it in 40 days, didn't you do it in 40 days?
Yep.
I don't know, at least on my 2+ years on where 90 days was a problem or 60 days was a problem.
Yeah, so why are we changing that and just hamstringing ourselves in the future, potentially? Maybe we're not hamstringing ourselves now, but we may in the future. If it's not an issue, why are we doing it?
Yeah, I'm thinking the only answer that I can think of, and maybe it's not a sufficient one, was part of the mindset was to make sure that we were being efficient for the applicants as well. So maybe this was the reason behind the comments from Chris to go from 90 to 60. I'm not sure. But in that mindset, I can think, yeah, that makes sense to go from 90 to 60, but I can see your point too.
And I would
So-
go back to the purpose. The purpose isn't
Okay.
to be efficient and easy for the developer. The purpose is to mitigate the developer's impact.
Yeah.
But,
It's a good point. Let's move along. So that's 6-1, that we were just on 6-6-1.
well, whatever days you do, if you could say business days, that might make it much.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And work days.
Yeah, that would be. Okay, so then, B, just a couple paragraphs down.
So section 6.62B.
Yeah, B. There's new language. It's actually, B says the planning board, and then a lot of stuff crossed out, and then C is crossed out, and then there's new language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it says the planning board shall conduct review and open public meetings. The chair of the board shall provide a period of time for public testimony and comment, but may limit the time period for public comment. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me how there seems to be an antagonism towards public commentary. You know, you take away the public hearing, then you add in language that says we might limit the time period for public comment, which totally makes sense. Obviously, if things are crazy, the chair's gonna limit the time period, right? But, I don't know, when you put it in there, added with the public hearing taken out, it just seems like you're kind of, and when I read it as you seem to be less interested in getting public input. Whereas, hearing you talk now, you seem to be more interested in public input, which is odd to me, because that's not at
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, my thinking was the purpose of having that in there was to assure that public could make comments. That was the reason why it said to, provide a period of time for public testimony and comment. I wonder if the last half of that, I don't know how that came to be.
I'm sure
mean, was
that
it-
that was Chris's language, right?
Yeah, it was.
Personally, I wouldn't be opposed if we decided to strike out "but" from there
Yeah,
on out.
from there on, yeah.
'Cause if it came down to it, we would have to do that anyway, if it really came.
Yeah,
But some of you,
Basically tried to
Somebody-
filibuster.
What's
basi-
that?
If someone tried to basically filibuster and have comments
yeah,
for
yeah,
hours
we
and.
basically said, all right, we're done with that now.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm open to that idea, so let's, so that was B, are you on that right one? Okay, great, thanks, Mac.
So then to section 8, appeals.
Okay,
8.3, appeal procedure. D. It says the Board of Appeals shall hold a public hearing on the appeal within 35 days of its receipt of the appeal request. So I was just wondering why Board of Appeals can have a public hearing, but the planning board can't.
Sounds like you're taking right out of the shoreline zoning ordinance.
could
Well, its
be,
existing language is unchanged.
that's true,
I mean, frankly, we didn't even
I think
discuss
that's
this
it.
because all we did was ask Chris to review it and suggest any changes, and he didn't have any.
right.
So then, section 9, revisions to improved plan.
Okay.
9.1, the last sentence after all the bullet points.
Mhm.
The board may follow notice of meeting requirements if it determines the change to be significant. I said, that doesn't make sense. Like, if you meet, don't you have to follow rules?
Hmm.
Did you mean to hold a meeting?
Right.
I'm sure. I know there's a lot of additional language that was put in for section 9, revisions to an approved plan. And that was entirely new, or it was moved or something, because it's all, adds a process for approving a revision to an approved plan. Either way,
Yeah, so that, this reminds me of the application we had at our last meeting where the applicant asked if I decide to put in a well, a drinking water supply well for my business. At the moment, it's just gonna be a storage garage. Do I need to come back to the planning board, to get approval to do that? Versus, I'm gonna cut the vegetative buffer that that is part of my plan currently. So it's substantive versus non-substantive in my mind, and I think this is intended to give us that flexibility to make that distinction.
right, and the wording we used in this case, which means the same, I think it's synonymous, is that last part, it says, if it determines the change to be significant, or in other words, substantive, right?
That's how I understood it, that's how I've read it.
Revisions,
But then-
for a revision.
But then later on, in 9.3, it says, the code enforcement officer can review a change to a planning board issued permit and make a written record and transmit the record to the chair of the planning board.
If, the-
So then the code enforcement officer is determining whether or not it's significant enough to go back to the planning board, which I totally disagree with.
If the code enforcement reviews a change.
The way this is constructed in terms of logic is, the 9.1 points out when somebody has to come back with an amendment to the planning board. The 9.2 basically says that for changes other than those outlined in 9.1, the code enforcement officer can approve those changes. And then that brings us to 9.3, which says just that. So I don't know if your concern is with that list, the bulleted list under 9.1. I mean, going back to my example of, somebody doesn't initially propose to have a on-site drinking water supply well, chooses to have one 2-3 years down the line because of changing needs. Does that really need to come to the planning board? I mean, I don't think so. But if Gary proves that and makes sure it complies with the plumbing code, no harm, no foul. I mean, you've met, what the concern would be. So it seems like maybe, I don't know if you have concerns then with that bulleted list, whether that should be the focus.
Well, I understood it as you can revise your permit and come back to the planning board for a revision to that permit. In other words, you change your development plan.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a significant change, then you just come back to the planning board and say, hey, we changed our plan, is this okay? And you, the planning board, can say, sure. You are not requiring them to submit all the material again, a new whole plan, and go through the timeline and, all that checklist. That makes sense to me. It does not make sense to me to allow the code enforcement officer to determine whether or not those revisions are significant enough to go to the planning board for review. If you make a revision to your development proposal and it was a permit issued by the planning board, go back to the planning board, have the planning board review that, one meeting, as you say, no harm, no foul, no big application, no 8 copies submitted,
Mm-hmm.
none of that. Just get me on the agenda, I made this change, planning board says no big deal, you're done.
I think the logic was they were just trying to get it so the applicant didn't have to, say, wait 2 weeks to sit before the planning board and have the planning board say, yeah, we don't care, that we reviewed your building, it was blue and you're gonna paint it red. It was just the simple things that were real non-issues that aren't bulleted items. That's what you had talked about.
Right. That's exactly right.
So, but the bulleted items, right, so,
Because they're significant, right, Mac?
no,
The bulleted items are significant.
no, it says, the planning board shall review and may approve a proposed change to any permit which it has issued in accordance with this article, which involves any of the following conditions.
Right.
Right? So any of these bulleted things are revisions that the planning board can just sign off on.
Re-review, yeah.
We would review.
In other words, without a formal application.
Mhm.
So the bulleted list, an increase in the footprint of the building, increase in impervious surface on the site,
Those are major changes.
they do not require a new permit. They only require you to come back to the planning board and say, hey, we increased the footprint of our building, is that okay?
Right.
You'd still have to provide the paperwork or whatever.
Yeah, the revised plan,
Plan.
site
Right.
plans.
A revised plan.
Right. Right?
So something that was not major, so minor, or something not significant or insignificant, would be the ones, that was our logic now, you know, I think, to say that if it's not major or not significant, then those things would fall to CEO. Which I think also understand that you already think that the CEO is pretty tapped out for a half-time employee anyway, under that framework of thinking, right? So
Right now,
I
it's
understand
not
what
even
you're saying,
happening.
yeah, based on limited time and resources.
Limited time, and so, and I wanna make sure, Gary, please understand, I'm nothing against you. The thing is, 18 hours to you is not at all what it is to most people. You have so much experience here, so much experience as a CEO, you're able to do things in 18 hours that a typical CEO cannot do.
And the reason for that, which people don't understand, because I live in town. I don't mind working Sundays, I don't mind working Saturdays, I work evenings. I'll come to Belgrade and do an inspection on my lunch break from my full-time job.
I totally agree.
If you hire a guy that works 20 hours a week and he lives in Livermore Falls, you're gonna get 20 hours a week,
Right.
period. And if you're a contractor that puts a septic system in on a Sunday, would love to get it inspected and finished, sorry, you can't get it done till Thursday, because that's when the guy comes back.
Right.
That's what people don't understand. That's how I accommodate this town.
Gary, how much extra time do you put in this building alone? Quite a bit.
Yeah.
An hour a day, all winter.
I know, but I'm just afraid of when you're not here anymore, that's my concern. When you're not here and the only thing we have is this language, a CEO without your abilities and without your concern for your community isn't going to have the ability to do what this ordinance says.
It's a real risk.
That's my concern.
Understood.
As long as you're here, I'm not concerned, because I totally know you care about the community way more than anybody else. It's when you're gone that I'm afraid. And when I say, I used to work for Katie Coggan, I went to a lot of different towns, I met a lot of different planning boards and CEOs that, even with the language in front of them, wouldn't implement it.
I understand. I do understand that.
Yep.
Mike, go ahead.
The other thing to keep in mind is, well, I don't disagree with what Mac's saying, if any of these things are gonna increase significantly the cost to the town especially, it may not fly past the town meeting.
Right.
It may not fly past the select board.
Right, exactly right.
So you've gotta balance that too.
Right, and that's something that we have tried to balance, because there's nothing that we can, in my opinion, there's nothing we should do to, in an ordinance that would, through another channel, drive up a cost for the town and otherwise undermine the entire process. That would be bad. We'd get nowhere then. And, but that's the reality.
Okay, so Article 5, review criteria. So this section says generally the criteria, so these are the things we're interested in looking at, right?
Right.
Section 15, XV, third from the last. It says, the proposed activity to the maximum extent possible will not have an adverse effect on scenic or natural beauty of the area, aesthetics, historic sites, significant wildlife, blah, blah, blah. I'm just wondering why to the maximum extent possible was added, because
Mhm.
it doesn't exist in any of the other review criteria. For example, it says in B, number 5, the proposed activity will provide for adequate stormwater management.
Yeah.
It doesn't say
Yeah.
proposed activity will provide to the maximum extent possible for adequate stormwater management.
That's a good point. I mean, it was a carryover from the previous language, so I wonder if that couldn't be, if we couldn't consider strengthening that to be more active. But it's just a thought. Duly noted. So Article 5, 15. Yep.
Another thing, why just suddenly switch to Roman numerals?
I don't know. That's a good question. Because that too was a carryover from the previous one. Why not go back to regular numbers?
So then, I'd also like to point out here that there is no review criteria for parking. Parking is actually a pretty significant issue for me. There is no review criteria for parking. Right?
There's a chat.
No, but
No,
we're in review criteria.
No, it doesn't list.
This, it says, an applicant for non-residential development shall demonstrate that the proposed use meets the review criteria listed below. So when you approve a permit, this is your checklist. You have to go through, this is your findings of fact. You go through each of these and say, yes, conforms to applicable provisions of the ordinance. Yes, provides for adequate stormwater management. Yes, doesn't result in air water pollution. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There is not a single provision for parking. In other words, your findings of fact doesn't require you to look at parking. You get a permit, you get an application, you go back to the purpose, there's nothing in there about parking. This ordinance is about mitigating the development to the environment. Okay? So, personally, I don't think there should be any criteria for parking. Parking, parking is such a huge contributor to pollution and erosion. Huge. The amount of runoff caused by parking is incredible, especially paved parking. And so, minimum parking standards actually totally exacerbate the problem. They don't solve the problem. There are a lot of places, not here in Maine, but around the country, that have maximum parking spaces. Because what happens when you have charts like you have here, is you get parking that is way too big. Basically, you're putting in parking for Christmas Eve. And even then, the parking doesn't fill up. Go to Walmart, go to Kmart, go to Target. The parking is huge, and none of it's ever filled. And none of it's ever, nowhere near filled.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason they put all that parking in is because of charts like this. When you start requiring minimum parking, they go through the calculations, and geez, we need a parking lot that's 3 times the size of our monster building. Well, that's just ludicrous. Look at all that stormwater runoff that's just polluting everything.
One of the things that we did in Augusta for that same reason, the Augusta Planning Board changed their ordinance, so there's a section that says the planning board can reduce the required number of parking spaces by 50% if they determine that it's excessive for what the needs are.
What percent?
50%. As an example,
Two.
yeah, 250. As an example, on Civic Center Drive, Advanced Auto Parts. they were supposed to have twice the parking that they have. And like they say, you know, you run into an auto parts store, you get a part, you leave. You know, you don't have
Right.
people browsing the aisles and
Mhm.
shopping.
Mhm.
So that's the reason that they did that.
Hmm.
It was just a section that allowed them to reduce it by up to 50%. They felt it was adequate.
Which is great, that's definitely a step forward. However, that sets off the light in my head again about it requires a planning board and a code enforcement officers in Augusta to be knowledgeable enough and the developer to be knowledgeable enough to come together and say, hey, let's work out an alternative solution. Which is great in those circumstances where it works.
Well, it actually says if it's demonstrated by the developer's engineer.
Oh, see? So I mean, how many developers are gonna go through that much? They're just gonna slap together whatever they can, right?
Well, and you've touched on an important issue, whether it's the people that are on this planning board now, or the people that were on the planning board one generation ago, or the next generation. We don't have that expertise. We're lay people for the most part. I mean, we bring various, you know, pieces of expertise to the table, but, you know, for example, right now, none of us are highway engineers or,
Right.
you know, parking experts, for example. Some of us have some expertise in stormwater management, some of us have expertise in forestry and wildlife management, et cetera. But, and that's always gonna be the case in a town like Belgrade, so your point's well taken, you know, from my perspective. And I happened to notice when you folks were talking, when the pulsars were talking, that I went to this and I noticed there wasn't any specific review criteria for parking. And you know, I mean, it kinda gets sort of touched upon with respect to roads and traffic safety and that kind of thing, but given all the problems we have with parking in this town, particularly in the village, it might be something we wish to consider.
Well, I don't wanna get off track, because we're still doing this, but just in terms of, I think the village is a totally separate issue. You know, parking in the village needs to be dealt with as a whole, like they're redoing the road, they got the whole committee looking at everything in the village. That thing is way too complex to be dealt with in this ordinance.
Right, I agree.
Yep.
I agree, yeah.
Agreed.
We're not gonna solve the parking problems in the village with this ordinance.
Yes.
We can avoid making it worse potentially, but we can't deal with it, not through this. That requires some kind of comprehensive approach,
Yes.
Still
proactive approach.
Take the bridge out,
What's that?
take the bridge out, that'll take care of everything.
So then, Article 6, development standards generally. Section 2, access to public streets. There's a big A, access to townways, and then numbers, and then there's a lowercase a, design criteria. So basically, we're looking at development standards, right? So these are the standards they have to follow when they want to access the public streets. So section A looks at access to townways. So if you want to put a development in that attaches to a town road, this is what you have to do. Right? So you have these things that talk about what you need to do and how the road has to access it. But then there's this whole section called design criteria, which I think we have no business. Why do we care? Right? So look, I said, design criteria, the first sentence, all portions within the street shall be paved with bituminous concrete pavement, paving shall consist of a thickness, blah, blah, blah. And then access points. So my notes are, why do we mandate this? The connection should match whatever the town way it's connecting to has, right? Or better yet, we should just say it has to be low impact development. I don't care what you do, but just make it low impact, right? By putting this section in that talks about volumes and access points and curb radiuses and stuff, what you're doing is you are mandating Western Avenue in Augusta or KMD in Waterville. Why do you think KMD exists? Why do you think Western Avenue exists? Because planners in those towns put in ordinances that said you had to have certain things. Well, look, that's what they have. I don't think we should be in the business of telling business owners, nitpicking business owners what they have to do. You have your business, you know what kind of parking is gonna attract customers. If you have no parking for your customers, guess what? You're not gonna have any customers. We don't want your parking to damage our land. So as long as you make it low impact, great, do whatever you want. We don't want your road to destroy our lakes and erode. But you wanna put in a road that connects to our town? Just make sure it doesn't pollute and make sure it matches what the town is so that you don't get some nasty, this dirt road and then 2 feet above is the town way, I mean, it's gotta match in some way. But beyond that, what we're concerned with, what this ordinance is concerned with, is making sure that the development doesn't damage the community, right? I said that at the beginning with a purpose. So as long as you're not damaging the community, why do we mandate that you have to have this super fancy road and this massive parking lot? Why do we care? Because then we're just going against exactly what we said the purpose of this ordinance was.
My impression of this, as well as some of the other standards, are, I understand your point about parking and its impact on stormwater runoff and all that, but there's also a public safety issue here that we need to be able to deal with. We do not want businesses creating elsewhere in Belgrade the situation we already have in Belgrade Lakes Village, where the public road is the parking. That's dangerous. And likewise, points of access and egress are, become public safety issues. Isn't that what this is addressing?
No, because elsewhere in the ordinance, it says part of the application is that you have to talk to the town fire chief and get the fire chief to sign off that everything is kosher.
That section has to do more with the construction of a structure, whether it meets National Fire Code, and whether you're storing flammable liquids, combustible liquids, et cetera. This is exclusively about vehicular access and the safety aspects related to it, which I think is an important function of an ordinance like this. Our function is as much to protect public safety as it is to protect the lakes and the environment of the community.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. And when it comes to the fire chief and inspecting something like that, I would think it would be unfair to have that person be asked anything about the construction of access or egress parts of this.
Well, I was thinking more, if emergency vehicles can get in and out, then the fire chief signs off on it.
Oh, Yeah, that, there is, and the amount of, it addresses, you know, for certain size structures,
Sure.
having, allowing the emergency vehicles to get around it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And
I'm more concerned that we not throw out the baby with the bathwater and have commercial development with people relying on the public road as their parking. That's just inherently unsafe, especially on Route 27 where people are going 60 miles an hour.
Well, I agree with you that we don't want people using the public way. But I strongly encourage you to revisit the language that you do have, because I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere.
I mean, I'm not a land use planner, but I like the concept that you laid out earlier about that, maybe there needs to also be a maximum standard for numbers of parking spaces, so there isn't, excessive parking. This applies to state parks even where they use grassed, special types of grasses for the excess parking on holiday weekends. There are other options other than asphalt. I'm personally not convinced that all the low-impact technologies work all that well, including what's down at Dave's store, which is as hard as rock and probably has the infiltration rate of about 0.
Well, they've also put in some pavers, the same pavers they have at resource centers.
Right, yeah, I know, but I'm not convinced it
They don't
works.
use it.
I'm not convinced it works, Michael. Over time, I think it gets compacted and the infiltration rate isn't all that much different than a more impervious surface in the starch.
I think more importantly for that is the vegetation at the end of the parking lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree that it's more impacted, you know, you do approach 0. But, anyway, so you know my approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So then we go to section 3, erosion control.
Mm-hmm.
A. All soil disturbance must be conducted in a manner which avoids sediment leaving the property. Development must employ BMPs for erosion control unless the applicant can demonstrate that the nature of the site poses very little risk of erosion.
Excuse me. Where are you?
Okay,
Page 25.
Oh, we better go section. All right. So
Page
Article
start at the
6.
Bottom 24 and then on 25.
I don't know what section are you in?
Article 6.
used to be Article 7, now it's Article 6 called Development Standards Generally.
Section 3.
You backing up?
So are you on Article 6?
Well, he was on 7, right?
Oh, no, I meant, sorry.
The numbering got changed, is, I think, what he was trying to communicate.
It's okay. So we're on Article 6, Section 3.
Well, Article 6, huh?
Yep.
Going backwards. I thought it was almost done.
There is hope. We'll get there.
You got my version, it's page 27.
Are you there? It might be 20. On mine is page 22. I don't know if that helps.
Erosion control,
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yep.
22 in mine.
It's the same on mine.
Yep. Okay, so yes, Mac, we're on Section 3 and then paragraph A. Is that correct?
Yep.
And you had talked about unless. Where were we?
Yeah, so erosion control has to use BMPs for erosion control. control unless the applicant can demonstrate that the nature of the site poses very little risk of erosion. Maybe we should just take that out. I don't know of any site that poses very little risk of erosion, especially in Belgrade, where we all funnel down into lakes.
I can think of one. This one.
This one is,
Yep, no, you're really.
Was that put in there partly as a result of this project, where it couldn't go anywhere other than the pond down there, the dried up pond?
Well, the beauty salon next door didn't submit an erosion control plan either. For, I believe, similar reason.
yeah. And that, yeah, that is new language. So is,
I don't see the harm in having BMPs, you know.
mhm. All right, duly noted. Section 3A, that sentence. Then the, let's see, yeah, the paragraph, all those paragraphs are oddly, I can't say numbered, lettered, right? It goes A, then E, did you guys know? So it should be like A, B, C,
Yeah.
D.
That was one of the typos I was talking about.
Anyway, minor. We'll get it corrected, though. Not to be overlooked. Mac, what's next?
Section 6, natural resource protection.
Okay. So same article,
Yep. Couple pages
section
down.
6. Yep.
Natural resource protection, A, natural and scenic features. Number 1, site development shall minimize, insofar as possible, disturbance of natural features. And why are we saying insofar as possible? Why can't we just say site development shall minimize disturbance of natural features?
Good. That's a carryover from,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of redundant.
yeah. Yep, good point.
Minimize, you can't eliminate.
Right.
Right.
But just that kind of
So it's-
language makes it, you know.
It's kind of soft.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
It's kind of soft. So then, section 8, exterior lighting.
Section, okay. So same article,
Yep.
section 8.
Exterior lighting, A, the last sentence. Says direct or indirect illumination must not exceed 1/2 foot candle upon abutting residential properties.
Yes. We have a foot candle measurer.
Yeah, no, I'm totally familiar with that.
Okay.
Night sky is an even greater interest of mine.
Yes.
So I'm wondering why it's only residential properties. Why can't we just say, you reach the end of your property,
Let's see.
your light should be done? Just remove residential.
Regardless if it's commercial or.
Exactly.
Oh, I wonder if maybe this is, maybe we had an assumption that things that were beside or adjacent to non-residential were residential. Maybe
I'm
that,
guessing that's exactly it, because that's usually the situation we find ourselves in.
We have a problem.
You do.
Yep.
With the main Lakes Resource Center.
They have a nightlight you talked to me about,
Yeah,
right?
that, but also they park beyond the store in the winter, well, when you change the time. And the headlights are right in our eyes, right in the house. And we asked them not to park beyond the store, and they still do. And we've asked them so many times to adjust the motion light.
Cause that too shines right in your house.
Well, that's,
This
Yeah,
is a
that's not-
section that, at some point, from one of the two times that the ordinance was amended previously, this got excluded, eliminated from the ordinance for some reason. Nobody seems to know why.
so then in B, it says, when practicable, exterior lighting, except security lighting, should be turned off between 11 and 6. Why does it say when practicable? It should say exterior lighting should be turned off between 11 and 6 unless the business is open. Why?
Yeah, cause that's all new language, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
All new, right,
And,
so.
you know, when practicable is just. So,
Wasn't it for security reasons, something?
well, it says except security lighting.
Oh, it does?
So that language
Hmm.
is there already.
Oh.
Yep. Okay.
So then you get section 9 parking and really no my feeling on that. Just get all my little comments.
I'm just curious, not to open that can of worms again, but I'm intrigued by the maximum parking, standard concept. Are there nationally established standards for that, or?
Well, there's a couple, if you guys are seriously going to look at this again, I would, and if you're interested, I would love to come back and talk to you about some standards, both for parking and for exterior lighting, because those are big interests of mine. And so, I'd be happy to share information with you, I guess is my point. If you're open to that.
I'm open to that idea. I don't know how the rest of the board members feel.
I certainly would be, I mean, we have two options, you know, one would be to go back to Chris Huck, who was our consultant, but I don't know about his availability, because we basically, you know, took every ounce of blood he has.
Right.
In terms of the amount of time, we required of him to,
Right.
to this ordinance. Or, you know, ask Matt to bring some suggestions to a future meeting. I mean, the clock is ticking on us here, if we're going, I mean,
It is.
in terms of making next town meeting. It may not seem that way, but it is.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's flexibility about it. I did, and I appreciate that, but, you know, that kind of gets back to what I commented on earlier. It requires, you know, conditions to be right, both on your end and the developer's end.
And they say up to 10%.
I would rather, so right now, the standards are, you have to do this. If you have something that's more environmentally friendly, we'll consider it over here. But you have to think of the environmentally friendly thing, and we have to be knowledgeable about it, and then we'll consider it, right? I wanna flip it. I wanna say, you need to do something that's environmentally friendly. If you can prove to me that conditions on your site are so different that somehow you don't have to do what's environmentally friendly, then you have to think about how that will happen, and if we have the expertise, we'll think about it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanna flip the whole way we think about
Mhm.
development. I don't want the environment to be the add-on. I want it to be the actual standard.
So what's next?
So, let me go to section 11. Screening, section 11, screening of structures, parking lots, and other non-residential uses. So, this is kind of a general comment similar to the general parking philosophy. Screening developed as a technique to preserve rural viewsheds, right? So you want to develop in a rural area, we don't want it to all of a sudden damage our rural viewshed. And so people said, well, let's just put a buffer, a tree buffer. So what we've learned over time is that the detrimental effects are worse than what you originally planned. Meaning, because you have this 30-foot buffer, your road to your development now has to be 30 feet longer. Right? And it has to be away from existing development because you have this buffer. So what you end up doing is increasing the amount of impervious surface in your town. And you end up increasing, you end up decreasing the views in your town. Because what you get are developments like the Dollar General there in Oakland, right? You go in Oakland and there's sort of a hill on your right, and behind that hill is the Dollar General, and you get a couple trees planted. So they have this buffer, but it's totally man-made. It's not at all natural. What would be better is if you conform to the natural geography of the site and maintain the existing vegetation. And if you're really concerned about the rural view shed in your rural town, then you shouldn't be allowing development all up and down your roads. You should limit development to developed areas.
Peter at the outset mentioned that one of the catalysts for these proposed changes is to take this ordinance as it is today and make it consistent with the town's comprehensive plan that the voters approved in 2014. Among the recommendations in that plan was what's shown on that map, which is showing growth areas, recommended areas for commercial industrial growth, recommended areas for villages, which is a mixture of residential and commercial, and recommendations for open space. That's what we've tried to tailor these screening standards to, so that a village does not have a 35-foot vegetative buffer in front of it. A village is like Belgrade Lakes Village. There's no vegetative buffer. On the other hand, I live on the Rust Road. I'd hate to see a auto repair shop or whatever, because we get this, I mean, this ordinance doesn't say where development can go. It just says how it can be conducted.
Right.
And that there isn't some effort to maintain some screening just for the sake of reducing the driveway by 35 feet. Now, if you read this carefully, you'll notice that the bias is towards maintaining the natural vegetation, and only is planting or the use of artificial screening like fences allowed when there is no, natural vegetative screen. Like, for example, in a field or something like that. So, the issue next door was that, and is the bias we've seen, or the perspective we've seen from developers coming before this board is they don't want any vegetative screening, not because they're concerned about the length of their driveway. They want maximum visibility.
Right.
And be as obtrusive as maximally possible to passersby. And that does not help the visual character of this town one iota.
So in an effort to maintain a visual characteristic, or at least one that we I guess had envisioned as a board, would be to maintain vegetative buffers as it's been outlined here.
One of the other things, that, just for everybody's benefit too, that a loophole that this language we're proposing closes is the current ordinance does not require a vegetative buffer, whether it be planted or the maintenance of a natural occurring one, when a private residence is converted to a business or non-residential use. And that's why across the street you have what you have, which is approved by this board.
Buffers are better than nothing. I see it. So then we go to section 12(5). So this actually speaks to your comment about attracting, or being unnecessarily obtrusive to the environment. I think signs are, right? So I don't think you should allow digital variable signs, because their whole purpose is to be unsafe and attracting attention, so people are not gonna be paying attention to the road, they're gonna be paying attention to the flashing sign right next to them. Kind of, once you go down this path of digital signs, then there's all these, how frequently they change, how many colors they can use. I mean, you're hitting yourself into a whole ball of wax here, because if you don't limit it, developers are just gonna take advantage of the newest technology, and you're always gonna be behind the newest technology. And so I would just say, don't allow them at all.
I do know that, as you noted, there we're including a citation to the state law with regard to changeable signs, which, as you said, regulates the amount of flashing light,
Frequency.
can only change once every 20 minutes, et cetera, which almost no changeable sign complies with. And my experience working with DOT on some of these is that this is just a major headache for them in terms of getting people to comply with the law.
Right, which will become your headache if you allow it.
Perfect example, that is Steve Appliance.
Well,
At
yeah.
that intersection in that corner, and that sign draws your eyes away from that corner of that intersection.
Yep. And I think our CEO could speak to that, because he's raised it at several meetings before for the public, that, and I don't wanna speak for you, but.
They're supposed to be enforced by DOT, but they're not.
Maybe a headache to them, but not a headache that they do anything about, right? I don't think,
Well, my experience is they don't do anything unless somebody complains.
And what happens is, a municipality can amend can have their own ordinance that amends that from every 20 minutes to 4 seconds.
Right.
Right.
When they do that, they take on the responsibility of enforcement
happily,
Did
right?
Sydney do that?
No.
I mean, we're gonna have changeable signs, at existing businesses, not just, regardless of what we do with this ordinance. That's just a reality because it's allowed by state law. A business like Hammond Lumber or Christie's, which are the two changeable signs I know of in town,
The town office.
or, well, right, good point. Because they're so attractive, they're the new fluorescent light, those don't, this ordinance doesn't apply to those. The town office did, we approved this facility here, but the other two, we did not.
No.
So,
Well, that doesn't mean everybody should have. Just because some can, but we know it's bad, doesn't mean everybody should have it, and everything's bad.
Right.
I mean, I think that's one reason why there's a provision to allow it here in only a certain, in a certain part of town, where, the comprehensive plan, what's in the center of commercial development, was the recognition that there's gonna be, changeable digital signs regardless of what this ordinance says or doesn't say.
Yes, Mr.
One
Pulse.
thing that's important, and it's in here, but it's a nuisance to traffic on neighboring properties, I get a picture of, these signs flashing like at night, you're trying to sleep and the lights going off and on, How do you control that?
Well, the way this is crafted at the moment, if, say, there was a proposal for, a new development next door to you or me or whoever, Rich, it would be incumbent on the planning board to, as part of the review process, to make sure that the applicant, was gonna abide by this standard. If they don't, we can't approve the project. The problem becomes an enforcement one, though, down the road when they say, nobody's looking.
That's the problem that they have right here, is you're complaining about parking in the village right next to you, right? Just like you're saying signs might be. The problem wasn't at the application phase, the problem is in the enforcement. So you're complaining now, and how is it gonna be enforced? What's gonna happen? So, you're just saying, here's another issue that people are gonna come and complain, and what can you do? What are you gonna do?
Your problem caused by parking in the lot or on the street, right?
Both.
And the lighting from the parking, and the lighting
Cars.
from the security, and
But you can't regulate parking on the street.
People park in our driveway, across the driveway.
Yeah, that's different.
I mean, I'm saying that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get people like this coming in, complaining and saying, where's the enforcement? And you're gonna say, well,
Now, who will enforce all these ordinances?
That'd be me.
They're gonna be written in such a way.
18 hours a week on this free time.
There's really no more to enforce than we currently have, truthfully.
But are they gonna be written in such a way that there's no ifs, ands, and buts? It's written that way, and that's law. And then if you go either way, or you want something different, you just can't have it, because this came up a long time ago, and something happened, and, they said, well, because of the way the ordinance was written, this person was threatened to sue the town, and because it wasn't clear enough, they let this person have the way. So, it's very important that whatever is written so that it can't be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. And that's our attempt, is to try to write these, revise this particular ordinance tonight that we're talking about, so that it's clear and concise and consistent, so that for enforcement purposes, we'd be going to the CEO for things. And for other things that would apply, where applications apply for things, if they don't meet what we're asking them to meet, then it doesn't get approved.
Well, and to step back, one step in the process, for our benefit as well as for the benefit of the applicant, so it's as clear as we can make it, and, you know, this is always a laudable goal and often difficult to achieve, but as clear as we can make it and as explicit as we can make it so that we're not waffling around making different decisions
Right.
on one application versus another application. And likewise, the applicants, when they come here, understand what the rules of the road are, out of fairness to them. But that's been a struggle under the way the current ordinance is worded in places. A good example of that is the loophole I mentioned earlier of not being able to, for us, not being able to require a screening in front of a residence converted to a commercial use. You know, if it isn't clear, then it's very difficult to require.
So for those cases and other reasons, we're trying to clarify and make consistent this ordinance. You know, bunch of humans trying to do it. That's all we can do. We're trying.
I have a couple of specific questions about
Sure.
illuminated signs, number one. So we're still on signs, B, illuminated signs, number one.
Yep.
The first sentence, except as provided below, signs shall be illuminated externally only by lights which are shielded or hooded so that the light source is not a nuisance to traffic or neighboring properties. I'd like to add there, and does not unnecessarily illuminate the night sky. This is not just people here, you know. One of the beauties of Belgrade is that you can look up and see Milky Way and stars.
Agreed. I remember the conversation quite clearly when we talked about, so, that is a value that we discussed as a board as well.
So then, later on in that paragraph, it says signs shall not give off or reflect at an intensity greater than 50 foot candles as measured 100 feet from the sign.
Mhm.
Where did that 50-foot candles come from, 100 feet?
Let's see.
I believe that's a fairly standard, I mean, I don't know, but
Right.
that's my understanding is from Chris, that that's a fairly standard, illumination standard, for ordinances
I
of
think
this of this type.
I'm gonna try to look for a possible comment from him.
Well, that,
No, that was a carryover, wasn't it?
yeah, that was in the original ordinance, but I remember having a discussion with him about the same, basically the same question.
I seem to remember that.
Right, 'cause we
And
talked about
whether or not
different,
that was still adequate, and he was of the opinion that it was.
right, because I remember kidding about different units, you know, because we could come up with several different units. Some of them, you know, no one would know, but apparently foot candles,
Yeah.
more people know than other things.
So I, you know, just like the parking standards that Chris put in here are standard, you know, I would argue those parking standards are grossly, over what they need to be, right? I think these illumination standards are perhaps standard for other areas, but I think are too high. There's an organization called the Dark Sky Society, and you just go to darksskysociety.org, and they have all kinds of information. I'd be happy to bring said information to you that gives all kinds of standards for outdoor lighting and signing. the basic argument is, if you have something super bright, your eyes adjust to that brightness, right? So if it's 50-foot candles, your eyes adjust to it, and then your neighbor needs 75-foot candles to look, otherwise it looks just like the 50-foot candles. And then their neighbor needs 100-foot candles to look better than the 75-foot candles, because your eyes adjust, and the light just keeps going up and up. If you tone down the lighting overall, then your eyes adjust to that lighting overall, and it's actually a much safer environment because you're not super bright, your eyes are adjusted to the actual environment, and you can see much more than you could if you have one thing that's super bright right here, and there's complete blackness here. Well, you're not gonna see anything in this complete blackness because your eyes are adjusted to this super bright light.
Right.
But if this light is toned down, then your eyes adjust and can actually see a lot more than in this darker area because your eyes aren't totally opened from this light. Anyway, so it becomes, lower lighting levels become safer in actuality.
Would be happy to hear some of those things, Mac. What was next?
I have a question, and this is actually for you, Michael. One of the reasons, we allowed, the internally lit signs, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, the idea that, not internally lit ones, but the digital signs, was reality. We thought it would be politically, unacceptable, to not allow them. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, they're very expensive. I assume the cost will come down over time.
Personally, I'm not crazy about the data. I want to move. They can be controlled. This sign, when it was first put in, if you remember, it was so bright, it was red, it was so bright, it came up here in the fog, it looks like it was a forest fire. They toned it down appreciably, now there's a lot more black. It's used for text only, for the most part. They have a few symbols once in a while. And it's used to get word meetings and things like that out. So, to me, that's more acceptable than, say, Steve's is. One Hammond has, I hate to criticize Hammond, but it's not the nicest, it's not the same category.
Right.
It's more like a sign that not just talk about.
Yep.
So it depends on the sign.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful.
So, next is pretty far away, it's, section 15, water quality. But it's actually, B, impact on lake water quality. And then you go to the table on water quality categories and phosphorus, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have all the different lakes and the water quality and the allowed phosphorus. And then all the small ones have a star. And then there's a star underneath that says, within these watersheds, if a proposed development will cover more than 5 acres, the allowable phosphorus must be adjusted, right? So I'm wondering why you use 5 acres, because these are smaller watersheds. Therefore, for smaller ponds, therefore more sensitive. 5 acres seems like a lot, so I don't know how many developments would actually be captured.
Kettle ponds too, aren't they?
Pardon?
The kettle ponds also?
Like, why not use use two.
Yeah, there are some, Joe Pond, Penny Pond, those.
Right.
Stewart.
We did change, I don't mean to interrupt, George, at all, but we did change the wording, you may know this, from, proposed development, it used to say is greater than 25% of the projected area of a watershed development. We changed from that wording to the 5 acres within the watershed. I know that.
Did that come from Chris or DEP or where?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my
Yeah,
recollection, that
and the comment.
we had asked Chris to go back to DEP about the whole table, actually, because
Yeah.
we thought the numbers have changed because of the continuation of declining water quality, that maybe they would go down further, or as well as the very issue that you brought up about that asterisk. And it's my understanding, or at least my recollection, that what he was, when he met with their engineers, that based on that phosphorus control manual, that technical guide, that's where the 5 acres came from.
Right. And his comments also say that projected area of development, the former wording, was undefined. So we went from an undefined thing to a specified thing.
Which I totally agree is an improvement, and if that's all you do, that's great. I was just questioning, if these are smaller areas, is 5 acres too much? In other words, how many developments are you going to have that are 5 acres in these smaller lake watersheds? I don't know, but if he went back and, you know, if that makes sense, that makes sense. It just seemed like 5 acres is a lot for a tiny watershed, right?
Yes.
And, you know, that's one of the limitations of this ordinance, or at least my personal view of this ordinance or any other ordinances. It doesn't look at cumulative impact. The comprehensive plan attempts to, with goals like, you know, trying to maintain 60% of watershed in an undeveloped or open space state. This ordinance isn't gonna accomplish that, but just a limitation of, this is a very site-specific, hence why in other towns it's called a site review ordinance.
Just, if you go, Article 7, Development Standards, Specific Activities. And then overnight accommodations, Section 2, overnight accommodations.
So, are you folks there? So, yep.
And then B, bed and breakfast facilities. Number 2, in addition to the parking required by your big table earlier, 2 spaces shall be provided for the owners. You know, that's another thing, like, why are we telling people that they have to add even more parking? Like, that table tells them they have to do way more than they need to. Now we're telling them they have to do 2. Just seems, why do we care? So that, Section 3, telecommunication towers.
Mhm.
B, design and construction, number 3. It's just a question, the last, it talks about setbacks. And then the last sentence says, but in no case less than required setbacks for the district in which it is located. So do we have districts with setback requirements?
especially since that's
Especially
original
shoreline
language.
zone, and it had a setback from water body or something, but,
Is that what we intended, was that what we meant?
no, I don't think so.
And, yeah, right. No, that's it, other than what's in the minimum lot size ordinance.
It's the only
Right.
ordinance we have a district in there.
Right, yeah. So that must have been written with just shoreline areas.
If it makes sense at all, yeah. Shoreline zoning ordinance doesn't have lot lines setback, so that's all is dealing with, and it doesn't make any sense. Not less than 10 feet from
So that was
all lot
section
lines.
3B, which paragraph?
3.
3, okay, so you
Well,
got
the
it?
fact of the matter is, this town's never gonna have a setback from, that's, equivalent to the height of one of those towers. We could easily eliminate that one
Yeah.
last part of the line.
Yeah, we could strike but in no case, because, the only ordinance that has, a district with a setback along shoreline, and it doesn't have sideline setbacks in it, at least not that I'm aware of.
The town says 10 feet, I can't remember if it's not in the shoulder.
The state guidelines don't, I don't think ours does either.
I'd have to look.
But anyway, it's probably something we could strike.
Okay,
That's it, I'm sorry.
that's okay. I, for one, am very thankful that you've
Yeah,
been
no,
so
thank you.
thorough in going through this and have put forth the effort to come talk to us. I really appreciate it. So thank you, man. Really do.
For what it's worth, I didn't know of this existence except for it's a public hearing. You know, here tonight, so I would not have been here doing all this. It was just one of the meetings.
I'm hurt, man. Okay. Well,
But I do really appreciate you letting me come here and say all that I said,
Absolutely.
listening to me.
Well, the purpose obviously is, more input is better than less input. And, we don't profess to have to not have good ideas.
If you can, let me know when you are gonna address this again, and I'll make sure that I get the material in your hands before then. I can't make any.
Put it on the sign up.
We'll plan.
You in the phone book?
Are there any other questions or comments or anything about the commercial development review ordinance for tonight?
I personally found it very interesting to listen to the discussion.
Thank you. I hope it was helpful for you, and I hope that we helped answer some questions that you brought up.
Was it more entertaining?
Time will tell.
Was it more entertaining than the debate last night?
I watched the debate.
You didn't watch the debate,
I fell asleep and, woke up.
because the next day, the television and the newspapers will tell you what wasn't said.
Peter, maybe if you were talking a little bit about our plans going forward, or what the process is from here on out.
Certainly, certainly. So, and please jump in here at any time, because I'd like to kind of outline this. George brought this up, and you may have caught wind of this as we were talking tonight, but our goal is to have this ready for the March meeting. So working backwards from there, we're trying to make sure we schedule things like this for tonight, have revisions, make sure we talk to the select persons and keep them abreast of what's going on, and then get it to a spot where we can have it ready. All those things take time, and that's our overall goal. if that makes sense. So there are numerous steps between now and even the end of year where we're trying to get this done. George, were we informed, or Rich or Roger, do you remember? I think, was it, we wanted to have text ready for print at end of year, was that correct?
Right, yeah, because our understanding from Mary was that Mary Vogel, when she was this board's secretary on a temporary basis, was that we had to have had the legally required public hearing, which by either the end of this year or in January, with a warrant article available by the end of January.
Right.
Does that sound about right, Michael?
Not right.
Yeah.
And
Warrant article, I think it's gotta be sooner than that, but it could be wrong.
maybe the middle of the month, so that, I mean, this is not a required, this was informal and not a required part of the legal process. But because at the public hearing, you can't have this back and forth, you know, it's all over but the crime at that point.
Do you see this going on the written ballot or on the floor?
I don't know,
Our goal had been
yeah,
for the
I
March
just
meeting.
assumed it would be on the written ballot, just because that's how it's been done before, but.
Yeah, I thought so too. The reason I ask is there's a requirement for, maybe that's the hearing you're referring to, but we have to have a public hearing within 45 days of the meeting before. No later than 45 days before the meeting on anything that's on that ballot. Which I assume would be this
So-
too.
I'm thinking that's what it is.
That's working.
Oh, yeah, and we've been battling this for a year, more than a year,
Yeah.
just to
One more question.
slog through it. Yes.
Did you have any idea, when you volunteered to get onto this committee, what was coming up for work?
You know, I actually think that this board did. Because of the involvement with the comprehensive plan beforehand, where different committees identified things that said, oh, these are valuable things that we need addressed. And of those valuable things that need to be addressed, they included revisions to ordinances. And there were multiple ordinances that need to be addressed. We as a board said we can get the biggest bang for our buck by tackling this one first. And we also know that there are several others to follow. So it's not just all the work we've done for this one, but for the ones coming up. So the answer is yes.
We get to be congratulated on the, what,
On our stupidity
effort.
or.
There are some homes that will be accepting us, I think, in the near future for residents.
Our current work plan, and the one we shared with the select board, is, calls for us, the next ordinance that we'll undertake will be the shoreline zoning ordinance, and see if we need to make any changes as a result of changes in the state model ordinance. And then the subdivision ordinance is gravely out of date as well.
So those are two huge efforts to follow this one. But it's important to us, you know, like Mac was talking about all the things, you know, that he voiced. I think many of us share those same values, and the only way to address them, where we have any authority, is with ordinances that can be revised. It's the best we can do.
doing good work?
We try hard.
Your ring binder looks like my quilting ring binder. Full.
So if there are no other questions regarding this, you're welcome to stay, but I have other questions for the board about previous minutes that I'd like to ask, so. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you very much. Mike,
Thank
thanks
you.
very much. So given the time of day, does the board wish to do anything more with minutes tonight, or would you wish to go another time?
Put them off for another time.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah?
That's fine.
Okay, so I think we should make a motion, have a motion on
Listen,
this. Yeah.
I make a motion to table the minutes.
Second.
Any other
I think
discussion?
Roger started it.
All right, all those in favor? Yeah, so our forum voted for that. And we want to thank you, Nick, for presenting the minutes. Thank you for having them prepared. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for the, hard copies.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very much appreciated. Hey, Mac.
it's just my notes.
Oh, okay, that'd be great. And I'd like to make sure that I don't lose them. Could I give them to you? All right.
Revised
Right,
ordinance,
thanks,
all
Nick.
same page numbers.
This is a lot more interesting than sitting in
Amazing,
front of
I
me.
think everybody.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Yeah.
One of the things,
I was
just so you know,
concerned about that, so
what,
I went with the version that Nick gave us
what we had was,
last meeting.
George, I asked George to, he was
Well,
able
you
to
were
do
getting
it.
different page numbers
to-
than I was.
We had that bulletized,
See,
remember that memo that went to you, it had some bullets on it? about what- And so what we did was say, oh,
See, that's the
this
version
bullet
that I-
addresses something found on this page. So in case we had questions from the audience about, hey, what about, you know, this or that? But anyway, just wanted you to know that we tried to be
Is the
prepared.
meeting adjourned?
Not yet, it will be soon,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
And come to and say it.
Okay, all right. So anything else tonight, gentlemen? Cause I wanna ask Gary if he has anything, if you don't have anything more to discuss.
No, not me. I guess I would just mention that, I went to the town website and I don't know, Michael, who, or Nick, who's responsible, but it looks really good on that front page.
Yeah.
And nice and clear in terms of when, you know, the meetings are and all that kind of stuff, and vast improvement, so whoever's responsible for
Well,
that.
that's me.
Okay,
Well,
I sure didn't think.
Well,
Get an
it's-
attaboy.
It's, me and Anthony.
And,
Yeah.
Anthony?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
and
it's
Carrie.
a lot easier to find.
I had a question for Gary, just, it came, I didn't think about it, so somebody said something about signs and sisters and stuff.
I think we say that with him.
I think he says Christie's Parking, where they got the new.
On the
sign
end of
there.
the building?
Yeah, so what is that all about?
I
Do you
don't know if they were having issues with somebody else parking, I'm not sure.
I was wondering whether they're advertising to rent parking space for like commuters in, what used to be the car
Oh, I don't think
lot or something, but it just, it says Christie's Parking. I thought, what the heck is that?
so. You notice that the contractor moved up, whoops, up there.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
they're still in business?
I don't think he has an office, truthfully. I think he's just all over. He spends a fair amount of time in Arizona at his other house.
He took that office out just so you could say you're a local contractor and get to be able to bid on
It seems that way, because that's about how long he was there.
Yeah.
Um,
Anything else, Gary?
yeah. The 27th, a week from tonight, is the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Dollar General.
What time is that, Gary?
7, I think it's 7 right
Yeah.
now.
And next,
Is anybody from the planning board planning on attending
Well,
that?
I was thinking about it, but I was gonna ask if, one, would it, you know, be inappropriate or in any way, or?
Did you guys
Yeah,
deny the application?
No, we didn't, they withdrew it.
I don't think it's inappropriate at all. I think it's probably a good idea.
I was just wondering if we do come over, speak against it, if there'd be a conflict of interest by being a planning board member.
Just make it
I
clear
didn't
you're
ask-
speaking as a member of the public.
Well, yeah.
You're
Well-
showing a bias, if you have an opinion now, you're showing a bias.
You're right, yeah, I wouldn't speak against it, unless you
Either
were
way.
asked a question
be, right.
about the ordinance or planning board's role or.
Yeah, I was mostly just interested to hear firsthand what, you know,
Yeah.
transpired rather than wanting to say anything.
I don't think it's inappropriate.
The only rule I've ever heard of, when I was on the appeals board, they advised us against attending your meetings because,
Oh, yeah.
to prevent that possibility of establishing a bias. Because the appeals board, that's all they do is adjudicate these things, so.
Right, right. I mean, this is limited, if I understand understand correctly, to an appeal of your decision to deny,
Yes,
and so it's exclusive to the minimum lot size ordinance.
yes.
Which, we don't even, as a board, have,
No, but they will, if they are successful, they need to come back to you.
right,
And that's when they're asking for 3 or 4 waivers
There were about 3 items listed in the notice, more than just
for the,
minimum lot size.
for the Board of Appeals.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, there's still 3 or 4 waivers they're asking for at the planning board level, so
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that they're asking for.
it is.
well, and, you know, their consultants have, the 2 times we met with them got confused each time
Mhm.
about who to ask, who, for what, and,
Mhm.
and I'm just curious of how much of that, comes up again.
This will be their lawyer.
Okay,
It'll be an interesting hearing, and it is a hearing.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do
So,
you know when you want placed on the agenda further discussion about this ordinance that we talked about, took comments tonight?
Oh.
You have pending applications sitting on your desk?
The only one I have thus far for the November 3rd meeting is K&K Surveyor, wants to come in and talk about the process now.
Did you guys discuss that at the selectmen's meeting at all? What
So, get at it,
transpired there?
kicked it back to you.
so we did talk about it, and, I had mentioned that I felt that based on some of the language we had referenced in the ordinance, that there may be a way to proceed. I also advised the select persons that, that the map, the shoreline zone map is the authoritative, map of the town, and that, changing that is a big deal. And I think everybody understood
We're
that.
all trying to stay away from having to go to the town with the thing. Changing the map would require going to the town.
So we did talk about it.
Peter said
So
you guys
that's
would
the
be anxious to
only
take it
thing.
up.
I think
We're
it's good.
hungry
We wanna
for
put
it.
it on the agenda?
Hungry, something to do.
Do you want, or do you want me to put that on the agenda, discussion of,
Can you keep the other item to one with K&K at this point?
can you put that on there?
Mm.
And I'll make sure I do.
I think that would be timely for us,
Yeah.
because like you said, George, the clock is ticking, we've gotta get some stuff done.
well, and we frankly have more to discuss as a result of tonight than I anticipated too.
Yeah, oh, I know,
was
I
thinking
mean,
I was gonna be home at 8 o'clock tonight.
So,
yeah.
so Nick, if I try to give you anything else for the agenda, remind me that that's it.
That's it, okay, those 2 things.
Nick. Put down, that's it.
Yeah, because we haven't even addressed what was mailed into us.
Right, which, that came to us because I was at the meeting with the select persons, and Dick was here, and we had a nice exchange, and he was very, very generous, and said that he'd be happy to help,
Yeah, he's got 2 or 3 points on there, so,
yeah.
to address
So-
those, so.
Oh, we didn't get into them, did we?
No, but we can at the,
Is somebody gonna contact Mac, let him know that that's November 3rd?
Sure,
You got a contact?
I think I do.
He's probably waiting on department level.
Yeah, you know.
does he live in that farmhouse that's right up the, 8 and 11?
No. He lives in Craig Alexander's development,
Oh,
Yeah, North Bay Estates.
North Bay Estates,
oh, okay.
or he did.
Yeah, I
Yeah, right
think
now.
he still does, yeah.
I wonder where he works now, if he's not.
Yeah, 'cause he was at, state planning office, which then
Yeah.
became, yeah, so, he might be,
Some of those, their people ended up in agriculture and conservation, but not
Yeah.
all.
yeah.
When
So-
we started the comp plan way back, how long ago? He was the Chris Hawk that
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
here
Yep.
doing it.
Yeah.
The expression was hire the top planners, but never put a planner on top.
Ah.
Get you in trouble.
Yeah. That's good. I had not heard that, that's pretty
No,
good.
I used to work for planning.
Yeah, yeah. All right, So nothing else, Gary, from the CEO? The only thing I wanted to mention was that we just talked about that I went to the select persons, I attended that meeting, we talked about the K&K thing. I think that's it. If that's it, let's call it a night. Let's adjourn. 9:55. Yes, sir.
Your adjourned, I just ask you, that provision, I never noticed before,